Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Sandy Currie.
Sandy is the STEM program manager for Google Canada. And before that, she had a 30-year career as a teacher and principal with the Waterloo Regional District School Board.
We also talk about her lifelong commitment to student achievement and well-being and how a culture of STEM is needed in education to prepare students for a tech-enabled world.
Welcome, Sandy.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review,
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
share directly from the platforms
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it. Fun fact. Canada makes over 85% of the world's mustard seeds. That makes mustard Canada's condiment. And guess what? Bonn Park is supported by Kaplansky's Deli Mustard. I love mustard. With 5 amazing flavors to choose from, Kaplansky's Deli Mustard adds amazing flavor to any meal. Kaplansky's classic ballpark mustard tastes like a warm summer day, and their zippy horseradish will warm you up on a cold one. Kaplansky's spicy deli mustard has plenty of flavor to back up the fire, and the mild has a mellower but rich flavor, and the apple Dijon is pork's best friend. Kaplansky's Deli Mustard can be found at Vincenzo's and Charles Quality Meats in Waterloo, Valerio's Market in Guelph, as well as Frobert's and Fergie's Fine Foods in Fergus. Visit kaplanskys.com and get a signature variety pack delivered right to your door. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Eat more mustard and celebrate Canada's condiments. We are supported by tiffinday ready-to-eat curry stews. Tiffinday vegan stews are delicious, nutritious, and so convenient. You literally just heat and eat because the tiffinday crew has already put tons of TLC into every meal. Tiffinday stews are perfect for quick lunches or for those nights when you just don't feel like cooking. Every stew contains super healthy vegetable pulses, which are high in protein and fiber. Tiffinday's chickpea and tomato stew is a bestseller, and for good reason. Caramelized onions and spices like cinnamon and garlic make the flavor pop. And then there's the wonderful kidney bean and rhubarb curry, made in small batches with tangy Ontario-grown rhubarb. Find Tiffinday stews at Vincenzo's in Waterloo, Top Market Family Farm Store in Cambridge, and Rowe Farms in Guelph. Check out their delicious offerings at tiffinday.com or follow them on Instagram and Facebook. Stop stewing about it and try their amazing food. Bonn Park is supported by Civilian Screen Printing. Need custom-made apparel like a team t-shirt, embroidered hats, hoodies, toques, and jackets? Maybe custom embroidered patches or even one-of-a-kind face coverings for stylish pandemic living? Civilian has you covered. Always on top of new technologies and ideas, the professional and friendly team at Civilian can screen print just about anything you want. Don't know exactly what you need? They've got years of experience and loads of great advice. Check out their offerings at civilianprinting.com or follow them on Instagram and Facebook. I think I'm going to have to order some Bonn Park merch. Who wants some? We are supported by Mighty Fine Foods. Picnic season is just around the corner, and Mighty can get you ready with, well, some mighty fine foods. They specialize in healthy, delicious, and functional foods and drinks that have been beloved for centuries. Their naturally fermented pickles and sauerkrauts elevate your meals with heritage flavors and ingredients. To perfectly accompany those tastes, Mighty Fine has thirst-quenching signature beverages that are great for your guts. Mighty Fine apple cider vinegar tonics come in a variety of flavors and are packed with goodness for digestive health. Very important. Find Mighty Fine food products at grocery stores and goodness me. Visit mightyfinebrine.com and follow them on Instagram. Currie, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
I want to know if it's as fun to work at Google as people say it is. I picture slides and plant trades and, coffee with magical unicorns jumping out of it. Tell us about that.
Well, not sure about the unicorns jumping out of the coffee, but for sure it is a very fun place to work, at least pre-pandemic. Obviously, we're all working from our homes now, but we still manage to create that sense of community with connecting with one another virtually. But nothing compares to being in that building. With the beauty of the old architecture and the beauty of the new and all of the wonderful people there. So it is a very special, magical place to work for sure.
And now what do you do exactly?
All right. So I am the STEM program manager for Google Canada. And one of the amazing things, wonderful things about Google is they exactly knew what they hired me to do when they hired me. So we've been able to create this job together as time has gone by. So I'm coming into my third year now at Google. And so what do? I try to excite and engage students, specifically those students with barriers to access. So those that come from BIPOC communities or females, those that come from low socioeconomic status backgrounds, and their teachers. And we try to excite them and educate them in STEM and CS in particular, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And we always add that CS in there, that computer science, because it's the backbone of Google, as a catalyst for empowering the future of learning and work. So yes, so a STEM program manager, again, trying to excite and educate students and their teachers in STEM and CS as a catalyst for empowering the future of learning and work. And so that really breaks down into a couple of major buckets. So Google has a free introductory block-based coding program called CS First. And it's really intended for students 9 to 14 years of age, the grades 4 through 8. And it's block-based coding, and it's meant for those with little or no experience with computer science. And so we have been scaling that program in Ontario and across Canada since 2018, when we did a pilot project with the program. So CS First started out in the after-school space or the club space, and as globally, we started recognizing that CS was really an important part of school curriculums. We started moving it into the school space. So we ran a pilot project with the Waterloo Region District School Board just to see what it was like using this free introductory program with real teachers and real students, and gained feedback from them and have continued to iterate on that program over the last 2 or 2.5 years as we have been working with boards of education, chatting with governments, and trying to get coding in the classroom. So that is one of the biggest buckets in my role as STEM program manager. The second bucket would be trying to mobilize our Googlers to help get them out in front of students and teachers to really help put that human power behind the compute power that we engage with in all aspects of our society every single day. And so we coined the term Toogler. So a Toogler is a Googler who volunteers their time to teach school-age children and their teachers. So it's us trying to put that human power behind the compute power. So getting the Googlers or Tooglers to volunteer their time with students. So pre-pandemic, we would invite classrooms into Google. We would do a little bit of a tour. We would talk a little bit about CS. We would do a little bit of block-based coding with that CS First program that I told you about. And we would hopefully send the kids off thinking that they now understood that there is actually people behind Google, and show them that what they're doing is coding, and that kids are able to do that coding too, albeit a simpler version of what the Googlers are doing, but to help make those connections for kids and for teachers. And then the third bucket is trying to identify what not not-for-profit organizations are in the great region of Waterloo, but beyond as well, in Ontario and throughout Canada, who are doing great work with our youth, and particularly those that are working in the STEM space. And through our google.org, which is our philanthropic arm at Google, we identify these not-for-profits and we help to give them some funds so that they can do the great work that they're doing. And we really work hard at trying to create an ecosystem where they are maybe working with each other, they're supporting each other. Maybe we're supplementing what they're doing with some of our Googler, Toogler, volunteer hours or folks that want to get involved. So those organizations are changed up over time, but we've worked with organizations like SHAD, Pathways, Horizon, House of Friendship, Kids Code Jeunesse, Canada Learning Code, just to name a few. So those sort of make up the three buckets that keep me pretty busy as STEM program manager for Google Canada.
And Sandy, do you remember where you were in your career when STEM first sparked your curiosity?
Yes, I absolutely do, Marshall. So I was principal at Laurentian Senior Public School in Waterloo Region District School Board. It was my second principalship, and Laurentian is a 7 and 8 school. And at that time, my husband was the Chief Innovation Officer of Communitech, so one of the incubator hubs in the region of Waterloo. And he mentioned the word STEM. And he had talked about it a few times, and I was like, okay, break it down for me. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I'm like, all right, well, we teach all those subjects at school, so we're good. And he was like, no, it's a little more than that. It's sort of explicitly calling these things out and helping to connect them to the real world. And even more specifically, trying to create more diversity than exists presently in STEM areas and STEM careers in particular. And I still ask, like, why? And Steve was able to share with me, you know how sometimes you're using technology and you'll sort of say, this isn't very intuitive, or I don't get it, or I don't find it very user-friendly. And it was at that moment that Steve said, just think, maybe if there were some people that were more like you, so in this case he meant female, that were working at creating that technology, maybe you, the user, would find it a little more intuitive, a little easier to use. And a light bulb went off for me. And that's when I started sort of working to build out a STEM culture at Laurentian. And then as I moved on to Stanley Park Senior School as teacher and principal with Waterloo Region District School Board, I always use my maiden name. So I was Sandy Dawson. And so one of the ways that I transitioned, Marshall, when you talked about that, like how did you go from career, is I actually used my married name. Like I've always been Mrs. Currie, but I always went by Ms. Dawson. And so now I'm Mrs. Currie, a STEM program manager. So just in case anybody was ever like, I don't ever remember a Sandy Currie being principal with the WRDSB.
Because it is sometimes part of your of your identity, right? You're sort of like putting on that new superhero outfit and saying, well, now I'm Mrs. Currie and here I go to do my new thing, right?
100%. It was very intentionally done. And I think also because I was piggybacking on, the experiences that I had as a result of Steve and his involvement in the tech company and the ed tech startups that I was able to connect with as a result of that, and also the not-for-profit connections that we had in the region. So it was intentional, and it did help sort of put a different hat on for me. So
I guess what we want to know next is you had this organic shift from teaching to getting an interest in STEM to all of a sudden taking care of all these buckets that you've described at Google. So what led to your career in teaching? Let's go back that far.
Wow, that goes way back, given that I retired from a 30-year career with Waterloo Region District School Board. So 15 years as a teacher and 15 years as a principal. So you can start to do the math there a little bit. But if we go way back, again, like most of us do, to our youth, I really enjoyed school, but I enjoyed school because I enjoyed the relationships that I was able to form with the teachers that I had. I found them inspirational. I liked the people more than I liked the subjects. And it became sort of interesting to me to figure out what schooling was all about. And I became more and more interested in thinking about ways that I could contribute to schooling and maybe make it a little different and maybe even a little better for all of the different kinds of learners that exist. It was pretty obvious to me that schooling was sort of maybe one size fits all, which didn't necessarily work for everyone. And I had a great schooling experience and great teachers, but I was really motivated to get into teaching to try to make a difference for those who maybe didn't see themselves particularly in the schooling space.
And Sandy, are there any lessons from the classroom that translate into your current job, or a lot of those skills very transferable?
Every single one of them is transferable, and I think it all translates from the classroom to what I'm doing now. So to me, Marshall and Sara, it's all about creating connections with people and then helping people to make connections either with themselves or with whatever it is that they're doing or with the real world. And it doesn't matter what subject we're teaching or who we're teaching. If we can't make those self-to-self, self-to content or self-to-world connections, we're probably not going to help that person to unfold very organically. And so to me, if we want to make a difference in the STEM space, particularly for students with barriers to access, we have to help them to see themselves. And so, yes, there are a lot of connections and lessons that I've taken from that teaching space to what I'm doing at Google. However, what I'm doing at Google is on a much larger scale, and it's very refreshing for me to be able to take some of those lessons to work sort of down in the weeds, if you want to speak, when we're connecting virtually and synchronously right now with a grade 4 class last week, but also when we're talking to the Ministry of Education and advocating for what we think is useful and might be helpful to be embedded into the curriculum. So it's a bit of a different scale, but it's a lot of the same skill set.
So it's not even just that the skills are transferable. It's like your experience in teaching has made you a special kind of person that can see how this learning needs to be done, that you're perfectly qualified to see where those gaps might be. We've talked to a few people on this show about meeting people where they're at. So we've talked to educators, mental health advocates, activists, and a common theme in our community seems to be like, you can't have these one size fits all, as you said, expectations to your community. You have to meet people where they're at and figure out how you can best serve them with what you have to offer at however you can access them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and I think to say that is one thing, and to experience it is something very different. And so one of the, again, great, very rewarding pieces of the work that I've been doing at Google in the last 2.5 years is to help Googlers to acknowledge as well how big this issue is of accessibility and diverse representation in STEM. And it's not just a quick linear fix. It's systemically much bigger than that. And we need a very multi-pronged approach in order to move the dial. And I don't think that we can, we have to be very careful. We can't boil the ocean. And that's one of Currie's sayings, but I love it. We have to sort of take one step at a time, and at the same time be thinking about the big picture as we're sort of mucking around in the weeds and making those little baby steps. So yes, it's important for us to get out in front of students. It's also important for us to get out in front of teachers, out in front of parents to connect them with some of the not-for-profits that we've been identifying that are doing good work in this space, but then also advocating with boards and with government, and then sharing some of those good learnings globally. And because Google is a global company, we're able to share some of those lessons and learnings really broadly, which is exciting and rewarding.
Sandy, I'm fascinated by this idea that you had an entire career in teaching and then you retired and you put it in a box and put a bow on it. And it's packed with memories and people and an endless amount of children and families that you would have left an indelible mark on. And then you start a new career as in, introducing yourself to people. And what does that even feel like? Like a lot of people would be so satiated to just have an entire teaching career that ends with being a principal. And that was it.
When Google first reached out and we started talking about this, so let me maybe just take a step back. One of the neat things when I had this aha moment when I was at Laurentian about STEM is I started trying to take my staff or my students or even people from the board office on these off-road trips, and maybe taking them for a tour to Google, or maybe taking them for a tour to Communitech or Catalyst 137 or to the KPL to the maker spaces, and sort of trying to take people out of their comfort zone a little bit. Again, sort of that multi-pronged approach. And I recognized in doing that I was very fortunate through really the work of my husband in the tech space in Waterloo region, and the work that we had done in the not-for-profit world in our region as well, to be exposed to Waterloo region being the highest density of tech startups outside of Silicon Valley, and sort of what that meant, and recognize that there was a real gap with what other people's exposure was to the richness of our area. And so I did become pretty passionate about, wow, maybe there's a space where I could help close the gap a little bit. So to go back to what you were saying, Marshall, when Google sort of first reached out and we started talking about doing this, there was a little bit of a like, I'm just kind of tired from 30 years of, giving it my all. But there was also a real excitement about the possibilities of continuing to make a difference in a completely different space using that history, those experiences, and those skills that I'd had a lifetime, a career, having the opportunity to build. So it did spark a real excitement in me. And being a learner is so important. I think that because I'm not the early tech adopter, like there were still people sort of on my staff or former students that would sort of giggle like, "You're doing what? Like
you really?
Yeah, you like
really, Mrs. Currie?"
Yeah. Exactly. And I think it's because I was willing to put myself in those shoes of not being that early tech adopter, and that I did need to be the learner, and I do need to make sure that I'm thinking about youth and what's important to them in their careers, in their educational careers now, and what can be useful for them 10 years down the road. So, it's been really exciting, Marshall and Sara, and Google has been great at being patient with me as I learn and working together and alongside of me as we build out the vision and mission around the work that we're doing.
I need to interject here and just talk about how much my kids think that, like, I really think I'm on the up and up with tech. A little bit. I mean, I don't work at Google. I think that I've kind of got my finger on the pulse of what I need for this stage in my life. And we started this podcast and it's a lot of tech. My kids tell me I know nothing. Yeah. The way they berate me for how I use Snapchat. I mean, I try so hard to get on their level for Snapchat, and, they're just like, "Oh, Mom, give it up already." So that's how fast these things move. That's no secret. We all know this, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's Thomas Friedman, right, that talked at True North a couple of years ago about this concept that the rate of change has now surpassed the rate of adaptability. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to keep up. And if if we think that we're ever going to get there in keeping up, I think that's the wrong mindset. I think the mindset is, okay, I can bite off this piece today, or I can learn this. And if I put myself out there, there's lots of other people that are willing to help me, teach me, meet me where I'm at, and we can get there together. And I think that educators maybe are used to being the expert. They're used to being the one who knows. And that's why something like the CS First program, I think is so important, because we don't expect teachers to have any expertise or any experience. And even the way we're trying to scale the program is teachers and students together in the class. We're doing co-led PD, so that teachers don't have to attend PD after school, but can do it with their kids. Learning competencies, the global competencies, the collaboration, the critical thinking, the creativity, working together to figure things out, rather than having the teacher be the expert and that the student be the learner. We can all learn together.
Have you read the book Sapiens? By
No, I have not.
The Havari. Well, I'll send you a link to it afterwards. And he talks about the cognitive portion of evolution and how it happened so fast that is basically why childbirth is as horrible as it is now. The heads grew too quickly and we didn't have time to adapt to it, and that is something we're still evolving towards.
I can't wait.
Sapiens, yeah, it's a great book, and it's not audio yet. I do all my booking audio, but this one I got to work for. Got to work a little harder for.
Awesome! I can't wait. I always love it when I get a new recommendation for a good read. So
you'll love it. There's a whole section on also the farce of how we all agree about society. They use Peugeot as an example. Peugeot as an entity doesn't exist. It's not a thing, but there's papers and signatures, and we all just agree that it's a company and a thing, and we all play the same game, the same as money. And it's fantastic. You'll love it. You'll absolutely love it.
Awesome.
I really feel for you people who aren't the technical wizards that I am.
Yeah.
It must be dizzying and so overwhelming and intimidating to keep up with this technology. I'm making a joke, Sandy, because I don't even have a phone.
No, he doesn't have a cell phone. No. I can't even text him. Our entire podcast has been planned over email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's, it's been humbling for me because, again, you constantly put yourself out there, and a lot of the big tech companies, as we know, are known for hiring sort of the best and the brightest. And so all of a sudden you're there saying, how do I hyperlink this again? Mm-hmm. Or what do you mean by, some things that seem so basic to them. But again, when you put yourself out there, I think that people are willing to help you learn and to teach you, and we all become richer for that. So
I couldn't agree more. And actually, it wouldn't be the system or the improvement or the change that it is without having people with 30 years of experience of educating and working with different types of people at all different levels. Without having that voice in the room, it wouldn't be what it is.
Yeah, it's. I guess that's the part, we're all smart in different ways.
That's right.
And I guess that's the part that I bring to the table, right? Is that rich, real, authentic journey over 30 years. And I guess even before that, I was a TA at university, and I was a tutor, and I was a Don, and I was a day camp leader. So all of those years of pulling that together. And when you talk to these Googlers, whether it's software engineers or some of the marketing and sales people or the user design people, whoever it is, they're really interested to understand how we can bridge the connection again between the compute power and the human power, and bring it alive for everyone in a way that's meaningful for kids. And you have to see the kids light up when they meet a Googler and they get to do a little bit of coding, or they make a computer do something, and you're like, what? That's what Googlers are doing? Like, I can do that. It's so rewarding to see the excitement for them.
Sandy, I was just reading a column by Nick Bettinger, who's a restaurateur who's going to be a guest on our podcast. He talks about leadership in this column and how not that any leader wants a crisis to happen or a pandemic, but when it does, it's actually like they embrace it. And that's when they really step up. And
this is what we've been training for.
Yeah. and they actually can thrive. A really great leader can thrive in that. Mm-hmm. Have you kind of felt that in the past year as a leader?
Oh, absolutely. Churchill, right? That says, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
And so it's that idea of pivoting, and I know everybody's sick of that word, but pivoting, iterating, changing, adapting. And we've all had to do so much of that, but there are ways that I think that we have grown and learned and been able to be better at what we're doing. And so I'll give you an example of that, Marshall and Sara. So for sure, we were having kids come into the Google space. And as an educator, I'm pretty used to school buses and school trips and name tags and counting kids and everything that you need to do to make a sort of a off-campus experience successful. But I was not good. I had no experience with doing virtual synchronous teaching. And yet that's what we expected all of our educators to pivot to.
And just like,
just like that, without having a whole company of Googlers to support you, right? Like just boom, do it. And so it was in the fall when we realized that we weren't sort of going back to 3D learning, that I thought I need to walk the walk and I need to figure out how to do this as well. And I was sweating. Like I was nervous about doing this synchronous live, virtual teaching with kids, but we jumped in. And again, we used some of our friends from the local boards to sort of let us pilot what we were trying with our Tooglers and kids. And we just, every time we continue to iterate and grow together. So now we're able to take our Toogler program to Superior North Catholic District School Board, to every grade 4 to 8 student in the most geographically diverse and large population in Ontario. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if it hadn't been for this pivot, for this crisis, for this opportunity to force us to learn. So for sure, there have been lots of good things that have come out of this as well.
Am I crazy? I feel like the next big pivot should be the internet should be free for everyone because we're dealing with this. It's a necessity. We cannot do our jobs without it at this point. But I know there's there's infrastructure issues and, of course they're big, huge corporations, but I just think that that's something that we should address moving forward.
Yeah, it feels really like a human right, doesn't it?
It does.
I was just reading, I forget where I was reading it, but about that the pandemic has been great. Lots of teachers have done a fantastic job of pivoting to virtual synchronous teaching, and lots of families have been able to embrace that. But there's also a big gap, and the gap's getting bigger, the digital divide. Those students and families who don't have high-speed internet, who don't have multiple devices, or a parent in the house to help them navigate this world. And so it becomes super challenging and that gap gets bigger. So I agree, we've got a lot of work to do. And I feel like people have been trying to step up and support that and help it, but we've still got a long way to go.
I think that's a great way to put it. Still work to do. Okay. So of course we want to talk about gender gap in the STEM subjects. This has been an historic problem. This is something that's getting better. And of course, a lot of these programs reaching out like Technovation or Girls Who Code, all those types of things.
Go Edge Girl.
Yeah. Go Edge Girl. And I never want to leave the boys out, but there is a gender gap. Where are we at with that? Are we getting better? How do things stand now from your point of view?
I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think that we are collectively all doing work and understanding how complex this issue is, but there's a lot of work to continue to focus on. Maybe I can just give you a little example from when I was a principal, if that's okay. So we were trying to build out this STEM culture, and we were piloting a program, an ed tech program, and it was trying to help kids sort of get excited about math, and it was aligned to the Ontario math curriculum, but it was kind of in a gaming sort of a concept. And the kids could, get a certificate when they met halfway through the program. They could get a real live medal when they kind of got to the end of the program. They could chat with each other. And so we're pretty excited and pretty stoked about trying to get kids pumped about math. And as we had our first cohort of students to get these sort of medals for this work that they had done, we recognized that every single one of them were boys. And so we took this step back, and it was like, oh, what just happened? And so I pulled my principal advisory committee, which was representatives from all the classes in the school, and said, like, what's going on here? And we sort of looked at this and we said, well, boys maybe like the gaming aspect better, or maybe boys like getting the medal better, or maybe boys are more competitive with each other. So I was like, this is good feedback. So what do we need to do to help our girls see themselves in this opportunity? And so we worked really hard. And by the time we graduated our fourth cohort, we were almost 50% males and females. But it was this explicit intentionality around recognizing what these gaps were, taking the opportunity to seek the feedback and try to do something collectively together about it, and to be able to celebrate that in the end. I think likewise, we ran a girls' STEM club, and it wasn't that we didn't want the boys to have opportunities, but we knew that when we had the girls together, it was different. We called it, hack and snack. And so the girls would bring their snacks, and they would code, and they would have fun, and they'd giggle, and they'd be silly, and sometimes they'd cry, and they'd support each other in just this safe environment that allowed them to be female, but also to learn and enjoy STEM together. So there are so many things that we need to continue to address that go way beyond just what Google's doing, or what some of the not-for-profits are doing, or embedding coding into the curriculum. There's a lot of discourse that we need to continue to call ourselves on as we try to make our way through to having a more representative population in STEM and in so many other areas in our society.
We had this conversation a little while ago about how it probably also goes back to just our childhood and the toys we played with, and how even today I was in the toy department at a store, and you walk by the girls aisle and you walk by the boys aisle, and it's a completely different color palette. And it's actually quite antiquated if you think about it. Like we're still there in 2021.
We are still there, Marshall. And
girl Lego and boy Lego.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just Lego, people.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I became really intrigued with as I started digging into this STEM space is something that we call, or that's identified as the STEM cliff, right? And so it's this kind of age where students either continue to associate with STEM or disassociate with STEM. And that sort of magical age for girls in particular is the age of 9. But we know that they really start to associate or disassociate much earlier than the age of 9. And we think of all the collective messaging, whether it's toys or colors or who
just
teaches
culture.
them math, or the culture, the unintentional messages that our parents and our teachers and our advertising and our society give us, all play a role in this gender gap. And so there's lots of work to do, and I think that we're making steps, but there's lots of space to do a lot more.
Where do you think the biggest steps are happening? Like, where do you see where we're making the most progress?
I'm biased to education, obviously, because education is universally, it's power, and it's universally accessible for children, right? And so that sort of top end of the funnel, but those foundational pieces, I think, happen in education. So I think it's incredible that we now have coding in the elementary math curriculum in Ontario, and that means that we're investing resources in helping to teach teachers to recognize what this means. Teachers are hugely powerful in the lives of students, as we know. And so if we can empower teachers to better understand coding, STEM, the messaging around that, right from grade 1, to me, that's one of the biggest steps because it's foundational.
Sandy, Google has a big presence here in Waterloo region. It's interesting to me. Everybody knows Google is here, but it's not because there's an article in the newspaper every day about Google or what you're doing. Like I said, there's almost this mystique to Google. Do you have any ideas on how that is? That everyone's well aware Google is right here in Waterloo, but its presence is not because of media.
I think I felt that myself, Marshall, when Google first came to Waterloo region. Again, Waterloo region, highest density of tech startups outside of Silicon Valley. We've got Communitech and the Accelerator Center and Velocity Waterloo. We've got top amazing talent coming out of University of Waterloo. And then, Google comes into the region and it's like a little bit, I call it like the Wizard of Oz, right? It's like, who is Google? Who are the people? And, if you kind of reach out and make an effort to figure out who Google is, that's when I feel like they open up their doors and sort of show you who they are. And I guess that's part of me having been invited into the space and maybe showing the way a little bit. I think Google was already amazing at inviting people into the 51 Bright Up space, but just showing that we've got a lot to offer and people just want to meet you. Like, that's what I say to the computer scientists and the Googlers all the time. They just want to meet you. Just let them see who you are. And so, Marshall, I'm not sure if I'm completely getting at what you're talking about, but I think humanizing Google is a goal of mine, right? Helping to put faces behind what Google is. We know that Google is known as one of the largest brands in the world. We know it's a big, beautiful, shiny building, but it's also part of one of the historic manufacturing buildings in KW, which sort of speaks to me of moving from the manufacturing era to the tech era. And I think slowly we're helping to bring a face to Google as well. And part of scaling CS First is having Googlers do a little kickoff with a virtual tour of our Google space and allowing kids and teachers to meet real live Googlers. So I think we're slowly making that human connection.
What is the relationship between Google and those other tech companies you mentioned? Like, do they have relationships? Are they like these big friends with each other, or you would have some insight just based on the fact that your husband with Communitech and you with Google? Like, is there a lot to share and talk about?
I feel like the pre-pandemic parties were fun.
Yeah.
I think I just want to clarify first, right? I'm STEM program manager for Google Canada. And so I don't necessarily know the right answer to that question, Marshall, but certainly from my perspective, there's great collaboration between Google and Communitech, Google and University of Waterloo, Google and a number of the not-for-profits that I've talked about with you. We're certainly building great relationships with our educational partners here locally in Waterloo region, but across the province as well. I think that some people might see it as, this big shiny Google comes in and maybe scoops up all of this great talent. But I like to flip that up on its end and say it gives an opportunity for the great talent to stay here locally. And maybe they were at a startup and they've come to Google, or maybe they're at Google and they go to another startup. 50% or more of the Googlers are graduates of University of Waterloo, and we know that those graduates come from all over the world. So we're really, I think, trying to create some diversity, some fluidity there where people can go back and forth. And I certainly see Google reaching out and CS trying to connect in with the wonderful region of Waterloo, but also beyond to the rest of Ontario and Canada that doesn't have Google in their backyard.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.